Hello, everybody. I'm Abir Shinawi.
And I'm Doug Handy. Welcome to Real Talk, our space.
Yes, welcome. Happy New Year, everyone. Ooh, and what a new year it has come to.
Wow. And I know, Abir, you and I have talked about, right, like 2020, a lot of folks wanted to wrap up. And some people started saying, well, we don't know what 2021 is going to be
Now,
holding for us.
they're
And
already telling 2020 here, hold my whatever drink you want to call it, right? That's what they're saying. So,
that's
but
right. Coping
today,
mechanism.
I'm happy, excited, honored that our very first show to kick off for this year is called The Right Stuff. It's WRITE, but I don't want new kids on the block to come after me since there's always the right stuff, right? The power of representation. So we have a powerhouse today. I know a lot of female energy. We were talking about that, but a
Mhm.
lot of sisterhood because they are all also Palestinian-Americans. My pride and joy
Respect.
as well.
Respect.
So we're we're
Represent.
excited about that. How about you, Douglas?
So I'm excited as well. It's kicking off a new year. Abir and I are still here, still doing this.
Yes.
Have, like you said, wonderful guests to come with us on the journey. For those that are keeping track, it was a week ago that
Yep.
there was an insurrection,
Mhm,
a mob, a violent mob,
mhm.
something that I admit I was outside of my realm of what I thought I would see in my lifetime. I'm not
Mhm.
going to say outside the realm of possibility necessarily, because if you know the history of this country,
Right.
it certainly can fit the timeline. But it was a week ago that this
Mhm,
all happened, and not to uh, not too much of a spoiler alert, but we have a guest who's gonna
mhm.
speak on that a little bit. And I say speak because she actually communicates in some other ways as well. So
Yes.
we're excited to have her and our other guests here as well. And as far as the right stuff, our authors, I mean, this is
Mhm.
what we do on Real Talk, right? We tell our stories. They're
Right.
folks that Abir and I, people we value, and we think their stories are worth telling and worth
Mhm.
promoting. So to have authors here speaking about what they've done, and they're award-winning authors. So very excited to
Yes,
start
it
off the year
is
like this.
very, very exciting. It's also because, the authors that are gonna come on, like, when I was growing up, like, I never read any books or seen anything that has positive images about Arabs or Muslims or
Mhm.
just Palestinians in general, right? So, it's very exciting to see the tide, turn, especially for my children as well. So, that's very exciting. But I do wanna talk about one quick thing regarding the, insurrection
Mhm.
and everything that happened last week. False equivalencies.
Okay.
Because I'm really
Speak up.
tired of these false equivalencies, right? And there's two of them that I've been like muddling in my head that I'm telling people, oh, no, you got to stop. Number one, comparing it to the Black Lives Matter
Right.
movements last summer, right? This whole equivalency of, well, people were rioting and everybody was okay with it. And you had all of these people creating all this ridiculous nonsense. And I'm thinking, if you just look at images, side by side
Mhm.
images
Mhm.
of the level of security and force that was used in the summer to the level of security and force that was used last week, huge difference. Like you didn't
Absolutely.
even have to say anything, right? Number
Right.
one. Number two, they were all peaceful.
Yep.
It's the Black Lives Matter, and we saw what happened with the tear gas that went in. Just because 45 can go and make his little, what's it called, his picture with the
Oh,
Bible
the Bible.
in front of
Right.
the church, right? So that's
Right.
that. Because the other question with that is, we understand what the Black Lives Matter movement are. People are protesting. You
Right.
know,
Right.
the lack of rights and the lack of respect for people for centuries, not even
Mhm.
decades, right? So
Mhm.
that's one false equivalency because what the heck were you guys protesting? That
Right.
you lost an election, right?
Right.
That's what they're saying, but they're frustrated. The second false equivalency that I'm really getting tired of people comparing it to is what goes on. Oh, now you know what's going on in the Middle East or in Afghanistan.
Mm.
No, those are not insurrections that are created just by the people because they want to get rid of something that they lost at. Those are also, and not just in the Middle East, we could even look at Central and South America, where these were propped up by foreign powers.
Right.
We know the history of our country with meddling with other people's countries as well. That's a false equivalency
Mhm.
because not only are you having this insurrection from an outside force, right? What happens after that, there's still some meddling that happens with that as well. Whereas opposed to this one, this was our people, right? They're
Mhm.
Americans who went in and they were fighting over something that really has no basis and something that really caused a big stir and shook up this country. So I just
Right.
wanted to talk about false equivalencies with that one. So Okay, I'm off my soapbox
That's
right
what
now.
this has
Okay?
been another episode of a beer soap. We're gonna have a spinoff in 2021, a beer
Yeah.
soapbox. So.
No, 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 no. We don't need that. We don't need that at all. All
No,
right.
but
So
we do appreciate that perspective, and this is what a beer does, right? She is a social scientist, right? She lives and breathes it, and like you said, she's speaking on the her personal, local, and the media. So I
right.
appreciate that perspective.
Yes.
Yep.
So we can, if you want, you can subscribe to our channel on YouTube, Real Talk Our Space. Also on our Twitter. That's your realm, Doug. The
Yes,
Twitter
yes.
page.
So Twitter, we are there.
Mhm.
Please join us. We're picking up followers, which is always
Yes.
good to see. But please join us
Mhm.
on Twitter and join in the conversation in between episodes. We
Mhm.
love our followers.
Yes. And then Instagram as well, Real Talk _ our space. If you want to follow us, and also at our Gmail. And if you
Email
want to,
us.
yes, at realtalkourspace@gmail.com. If you have any ideas, comments, concerns, whatever, let us know. All right.
All
Without
right.
further ado, let's introduce our
It's
first
time for
guest.
the guest. So our
Yes.
first guest is Eman Mohammed. She's an award-winning photojournalist and senior TED Fellow based in Washington, D.C. She is a visual artist born in Saudi Arabia and educated in Gaza City, Palestine, where she started her photojournalism career at the age of 19.
Ooh.
Eman's work currently focuses on women in culturally sensitive communities and on investigative stories of marginalized communities right here in the United States. And we are so happy that she is here with us this evening. Welcome, welcome.
Hello,
Thank you so
Eman.
much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you for being on our show. Welcome. Awesome. So, really quick before we ask your first question, Eman and I met, correct me if I'm wrong, Eman.
Yeah.
Where I was at my first Gaza 5K, and I believe you were taking pictures.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that that's how we met.
That's amazing. Like it feels like it was
years
yesterday.
ago. No, it was
No.
years ago. A couple years ago. So thank you for being on our show. And before we begin, this
Thank
is
you for
Adam
having
Strom.
me.
He says, "Hey y'all, thank you for
Hey,
tuning
Adam.
in,
What's
Adam."
happening?
That's my new boss. So first question for you, Eman, is what is your migration story?
So I'm Palestinian, and I lived in Gaza all through my life. I wasn't born there, but I lived there most of my life. And I married an American, and so I continued living in Gaza up to 2014 during the very last war on Gaza. And in one of the awful where illegal weapons were used in an airstrike, my youngest got injured. And so that required us to evacuate. And because she has an American passport and that she's American by father, so we had to get to, the US was the most, like the place that makes most sense to go for her medication and for her to get medical attention, period. And so we came here thinking that it's going to be a month or two. I didn't think that it's going to take more than that. And unfortunately, it took up to almost a year to 2 years for her to fully recover, which at that point, moving as an independent photojournalist is tough on the career. Sometimes it can be a career suicide if you're rooted in one place, you do it and you know how to do it, and suddenly you move. And so I had to restart all of that here in the US. And in addition to being impossible to get into Gaza and get out of Gaza like normal people do, it had been under closure since then. So the borders open for the matter of few weeks, barely, and it's unpredictable when it's going to open. So it had been impossible to go back, in addition to the fact that my whole career really shifted topics and focus, and I had to make that step instead of not doing any work all through her recovery. So unfortunately, I became an immigrant by force because
Such
it
as
was
the
not.
Palestinian story, right?
Yes, absolutely. It was not a choice I wanted necessarily to make it, but it was just the course of life.
Okay, so now you're here. And
I'm
we got
here.
you.
Yes. Happy that you're here. Now, Eman, I think it's interesting too, like you said, you started your career while you were still in Palestine. continued along that line, in the photojournalism as you came to the U.S. How does your identity play a role in your work?
Mm-hmm.
I think identity in general influence your interest, the topics that create some sort of curiosity in your mind. And in photojournalism, you have to have that motive to keep your career going and to keep your stories influential and having an impact on the audience or on the people. And so I think my identity as a Palestinian attracts to marginalized communities, to how I see injustice, how I see unjust actions being taken against certain people. And Palestinians have a really good idea about how it is to walk a mile in other people's shoes. So me coming with that background helped me attract into more in-depth stories, to not want to have the headlines kind of stories. I don't want to to trace the stories that make it to the headlines, but the ones that don't, and the ones that in depth that tells you why. I think as a journalist, it's our duty to answer all the questions, where and when and what and why is just my chosen course of work that had been influenced heavily by me being a Palestinian and living under occupation and having to endure war and to cover it as well when it's on home, when it's on a place that I think in so many ways that's torture. Like that's and it makes you realize your capacity and what you're interested in highlighting, because being neutral is such a myth. It means that journalists have to shut their eyes, close their ears, and just document and not even say a word, which thankfully we see a little bit of a walk away from that nowadays. Journalists do have opinions in the case of seeing injustice being done, seeing wrongdoing happening, and not being able to label it as such. Right. So when it's very clear, I think it's our duty to say so, not just a journalist being vocal or talkative or no. It's important. And I think if I wasn't raised in Gaza, and if I wasn't Palestinian, if I wasn't a refugee, I wouldn't have identified with a lot of the communities that I cover worldwide, and specifically here in the U.S.
Those are very, very, very good points. And I think you also make a good point about journalists are supposed to be telling the facts, but you take out the humanity. You see a lot of things, and you bottle that up. But there's that video of the CNN broadcaster, her last name I think is Sidner, that's going around showing her breaking down on national TV, crying of all the COVID cases. Yeah. And she's apologizing. People are telling her, don't apologize. Right. So you see a lot.
So absolutely.
You spoke about being Palestinian, being from Gaza, and your identity, but why does representation matter to you?
I think it goes without saying that when you're a minority, or when you're pushed to look like a minority, to be treated like a minority, to be part of a marginalized society and community, it's hard to aspire and having ambition not killed when you don't see people who look like you making it. When you don't, they are so underrepresented represented that you don't get that chance as a child to even see someone who looks like you in a position of power or any of that. So for me, I'm trying to do a tiny bit of a piece of what I wish that had been done. I wish that more people were proud at their origins and heritage when they were at their peak, and they didn't go diplomatic and hide themselves and shrink themselves and and just try to fit the mold, try to, whether it's corporate world, politics, anything. I think we do all of this. We fight those wars. We with injustice and racism and hatred, because we want a better future for ourselves and our children, and just our world in general. So when we go underrepresented or not represented at all, it almost makes you feel unseen, like you're not real. And so it's important to be able to change that. And I think shattering stereotypes is all what the coming the coming generation is all about. Immigrants, refugees, any kind of society that had been discriminated against, they all are outspoken and they are proud of their journeys. So it's important to represent. I mean, it doesn't have to be a nationality, but you have to stand up for something.
So, Eman, that really, one thing you said that really connected with me at the top of your response. You said something about, being made to feel like a minority. I'm paraphrasing, but I really appreciate that, because I think, they talked about the beginning of, the current administration starting about the otherizing, right? Making people feel like, to what I hear you saying too, that sense of feeling like you don't belong.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate how you wrapped it up, because it doesn't matter, whether you're a Black man in America or, Palestinian-American, if the atmosphere, the environment is made to feel like you do not belong, and that you deserve to be oppressed or you deserve less. So I definitely appreciate, we always go back and watch the shows and start digging through responses. So I'm like, I get some now, I go back later and get some more. So I really appreciate that response for sure on representation. Excellent.
Absolutely.
All right. So, and you talked about this a little bit already in your response earlier, but the question is, why photojournalism? But I want to break that down a little bit, because I'm thinking, as someone who's dabbled in photography, certainly not on your skill level, but I've dabbled in photography. I don't know if I ever thought about being a photojournalist, but then also the journalism part. And why did you choose? So why did you take your, the photography and the journalism and bring them together, if you will? So if you can kind of dig into that a little bit more about, like, why did you choose photo to tell your story, or why did you choose to tell stories with photos? If that,
Yeah, no, that's a valid question, because I feel photojournalists have different reasons and journalists have different reasons why they do what they do. Actually, everybody have a different reason. I think for me, I was one of those annoying children who knew that I wanted to be a journalist since the age of 10, and I didn't budge and I didn't change my mind. And it just, that again goes back to me being a Palestinian and wanting people to know stories. And in general, like anything that you go through your life is worth of a story to yourself. So imagine about other people. I wasn't that eloquent in the way that I put it when I was 10, but I was just thinking that I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to take interviews and ask questions, and I couldn't shut up, not for a second. So I felt like I could fit into that of being a journalist. But then as I grew older, I understood that it's a very impactful role, and it's a very important one. And I still held on to it. As for photography, my mom was one of those parents who like to travel and like to adventure and go into the unknown and different cultures and different environments. And she was pretty brave about that. And she always had a camera. And that just to me, is connected so deeply to my childhood, that camera is something part of how I was raised. And so I knew that I loved photography for so many reasons, but it wasn't until it was time to enroll into college that I was like, obvious, photojournalism, that's a thing. Apparently people do it. So unfortunately, we didn't have that major at university, not for girls, but we couldn't enroll in that. And it wasn't until years now, thankfully, it's back. It's not back, but it's finally in colleges in Gaza, and it's being taught for them as well. But I think people were not on the same level of understanding the power of photo even then.
Right.
So that mainly what got me into photojournalism, but I didn't know if I was good at it. And honestly, a lot of people are like, so you just discovered your talent? I'm like, I had none. I don't know if I had a talent. I just started and learned and practiced. I wasn't a good photographer right off the bat, to be honest. And it took me a while, but I was sure that this is what I want to do, unless like I'm a horrible photographer. I want to work on this.
Okay.
So that's mainly why I felt like it's meant to be my path when I finally started to attract recognition and people saying, actually, we want to see more. But I started as a reporter. So even through my path to do work, I started as a reporter because there weren't much of positions given to women in photojournalism, or we didn't have any due to the violence in the news. So really, it was very discouraging kind of career.
Wow. Okay. So you took something that you love and made it into a career, and you didn't let anything get in your way. Love it. I think we brought on the right
Absolutely.
one, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I would disagree about your pictures, but go ahead, Doug. I think you wanted to go to the comments.
Yes, I do. So I'm gonna say we'll call him the gentleman and the scholar.
Yes.
Ryan 20. And to well, let's read his question. So he says the answer to the first part is yes, you can ask questions.
Yes.
What advice, Eman, would you offer students of any age looking to capture their stories, either for personal work or as a possible future livelihood? And I will tell you, Ryan is a very excellent photographer and photographer teacher and a visual artist, visual art teacher. Just give you a little background, but that's his question. So I'll turn it over to you.
So if I understood the question correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think personal stories are very important. And it wasn't until recently that people started to realize that you can tell a story that is about you. It's not narcissistic. It's important. It inspires people. It shows them that they are not alone, and some can relate to it. So photographers who capture their stories, their personal stories, I have so much respect to that. I think those who just cover stories apart from telling their own also invest a lot of that in. I think it takes a toll on their mental health sometimes, whether it's good or bad. It's the repetition, or it's that it was depressing and really tragic and sad or violent. Even the ones who are, not everyone is a war photographer. Some go into the photography is insanely broad word for a lot of things. Photojournalism is also the same, because you have different nature of stories and each attract different photographer. So I think to watch out for themselves, to watch out for their mental health, because we all want to do those stories. We all want to tell, we all want to be those kind of heroes who unveiled something. But sometimes we forget that it takes a toll. And it's important, because that also helps you to understand people's limitations and not to push when it's not appropriate to do so on your own subjects and the people who are telling you their stories. I think that answers the question. I hope I understood it right.
I think that got to it.
And just to touch on the livelihood part, it's not a bad thing to do other types of photography or other types of jobs, even to keep that and not compromise your personal stories. I did it. I still do it. There's always a side job somewhere.
Right.
That whether it's commercial photography, as you saw on my website, whatever it would be. Am I passionate about capturing commercial kind of photography? I love it, but it's different. It's just completely different. There's no comparison.
Right. So that's
Excellent.
a good. It's interesting you say that. I was watching Shark Tank, right? And they were saying the same thing. Like, you can do what you love, but you still got to make a living.
Right.
You
Right.
know, you can't
Yeah.
throw everything out. And really quick, if anybody's interested, this is her website where you can see all of her great, you know, baby smash cakes and weddings and all of that if you want the personal photography. So you mentioned how you know, at first didn't think you really took good pictures and you weren't good at your job. We're going to share some images that you took when you were at the insurrection last week, and we would like you to walk us through these pictures because this is exactly what you do, right? You capture a moment, and then we have to decipher what's going on. So these are 3 images. So talk to us about what's going on here in these 3 different images.
So the one on the right,
Mhm.
the biggest size one,
Mhm.
it was when like the protest, the march, got to its peak of
Mm.
hateful, I don't know, it's chants and like hateful things that people were saying, and they were so emotional and so wrapped up in the moment. And so this young man got on his sister's shoulders, and even it was so conflicting for me because it was kind of a funny, sweet moment in such a terrible event
Mm.
and
Mm.
environment. And as you can see, it was just so in them that this
Mhm.
is the right thing. And you can look at them, and that's pretty much the racial relations that we're having and the racial injustice that we're having, is that nice people do horrible things. Nice
Mm.
people
Mm.
support horrible things. It's a different kind of nice people. So they were just having their moment, but almost oblivious that to the like the hatred they are spreading and calling for.
Mm.
Um, and honestly, even in that moment, it was so terrifying and unsettling to be taking photos of them, because you never know. They get pissed off if they see a camera, so you
Mhm.
really never know. And same to the one on the left, where you can see 3 men dressed in what looks like a camouflage army suit
Tell us the
thing.
conversation you had with 2, I think one of those men, correct?
Yes, the
Okay.
third one is actually not in the photo. So they attracted my attention because I thought that we have army around the protest. I'm like, why do we have army? And then I kind of it snapped so quickly, that they are actually proud boys, and that they are
Mm.
technically preparing for the end of the world. And as much as it terrifies me, and I hate having to communicate with people in those events, because I as a journalist, I feel like I'm a target, or
Mhm.
there's a target on my back. And he just he looked he tolerated me being around, taking photos, and then he asked, "So where are you from?" Which is something I guess asked
Mhm.
frequently in those kind of protests and marches or events. And I just I don't remember. I think I said, um, I'm from DC, or I'm from the area, because I mean I am American now.
Mhm.
It's my right to say that I'm here. And I hate the fact that they are always stereotyping. Like, if you look different, you're definitely not from here. Before they
Right.
Mhm.
hear your accent, before they know anything about your history. And so I responded, and he's like, no, 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 no. What is your kind called?
Mm.
Um,
What does that even mean?
I mean, to me, I'm always puzzled by
Absurd.
things they say.
Right.
I'm puzzled by the white power sign. I'm
Mhm.
puzzled by a lot of things here in the US that I'm still learning about. But it sounded like a very degrading kind of
Mhm.
Mm.
way of, and I hate to jump into that, because I'm always told by a lot of friends, most of them are white, Iman, you sometimes are too defensive, or like you're looking
Mm.
for something that would be racially triggered. But it was obvious that it
Right.
was racially triggered.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It was just a very unsettling moment, because I felt compromised. I couldn't respond. I couldn't entertain him with a response, because I didn't know if there is like harm that comes after
Mhm.
that, if
Mm.
this is just a way to escalate. and to get a reason why they would attack me or escalate it with me. And it's hard enough to take those photos when you're a woman of color and when you're a woman, period. The third photo was the crowd just started. As part of our security training, we have to always know an exit, and suddenly there was no exit. It just they started to storm around you, and it became obvious that this is the picture. It's just their number and what they stand for. It's Trump and what they call Blue Lives Matter kind of flag, but it's really just a vicious, very high numbered mob.
So, and you said it right there, like there was no exit. That's got to be terrifying.
That's scary. Yeah.
So having
it's never, it's always unsettling to be in those events because it's hard to know, like, and they are almost never Trump protests. They are never surrounded by police. So it's provoking because I also covered Black Lives Matter protests, and the difference between the two is day and night. One is like barricaded by an army and suffocated and like put in a small zone, and the other one is like spread all over the Washington Monument, and there's no police around to even like assist us or protect us or I don't know, stop any counter protest. They seem pretty comfortable in their protest.
Well, I think that's the norm.
Yep.
So we have a comment from our friend Keith that struck a nerve. What's your kind? The ignorance mixed with your bravery to take pictures of hate. And that's exactly what it is. Thank you for, stories can't be told if somebody isn't there to tell them with images. And these are going to resonate 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And if anybody wants to see more of Eman's amazing work, you can follow her Instagram at EmanIt. Very simple, just like that. So thank you again, Eman, for being on our show. Thanks for all the work that you do and your bravery. So we would like to end off with a positive note for you. So this is one of our questions. And the question is, which artist would you have perform an album about your life and why? And what would the album title be? Now, I'm assuming it may not have any words and just an image, but go for it.
An artist, an album. Are we talking singers?
I would say traditionally we talk singers, musicians, but it's your album, so you tell us. You tell us what's in it.
We only have an album. I think I hope I'm answering this the right way. I think I would go with Mashrou' Layla. It's a band. It's an Arab band that talks a lot of volume about the society, the challenges we have among ourselves, and the challenges we have in the Arab world, in Palestine. And I think it's I think the title, I used it in one of the most important projects that I've covered, and I would say What Lies Beneath, because I used it back then for What Lies Beneath the Rubble, but like there is always more.
Yes. You went all philosophical on us now, Eman. There you go. What lies beneath. So Mashrou' Layla, now I got to check them out. I don't think I've heard of them, but I think that would be.
They're a bit controversial, but like for the right reasons. So
hey, I'm up for controversy. I don't care. We'll offer that. So again, thank you, Shukran Habibti, for being on our show.
Thank you, Habibti.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Dog.
You're welcome, Eman. This was a pleasure.
On Instagram, if you want to see more pictures, and Eman Mohammed at emanmohammed.com. All right, take care, Habibti.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye now.
All right. So here we go. That was a good.
That was
first
wonderful.
Part of our segment.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Let's keep it moving.
Yes, keep it moving. Yes.
Yes.
All right. So we're going to keep it rolling.
So our next guest is Sahar Mustafah, is the daughter of Palestinian immigrants. An inheritance she explores in her fiction. Her first novel, The Beauty of Your Face, was named a 2020 notable book and editor's choice by New York Times Book Review, Best Fiction by Women by Marie Claire magazine, and a 2020 Best Book by The New Arab, among other honors. And her short story collection, Code of the West, was a winner of the 2016 Willow Books Fiction Award. And Sahar writes and teaches outside of Chicago. Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, that Chicago love always.
You know it.
Right. And we're also happy to welcome Susan Muaddi Darraj. Her short story collection is called A Curious Land, Stories from Home, and it has won numerous awards. And she can talk to us about those when she joins us. In 2018, Susan was named a Ford Fellow by USA Artist. In 2019, she launched the viral hashtag Tweet Your Thobe. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Okay, let me make sure I'm correct here. Social media campaign to promote Palestinian culture. Later that year, she was named winner of the Rose Nader Award by the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, or the ADC, an award given by the Nader family to a person who, quote, demonstrates an unwavering dedication and commitment to values of equality and justice. So we are happy to have our guests here with us this evening. Welcome, welcome.
Welcome. Ahlo sahla, as we would say.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Hi.
Super excited. Hello.
Very exciting.
Yes. So we're going to jump right in. And we always love to start with the question, what is your migration story?
Go ahead,
Either
Sahar.
Oh, well, I
We're
want
so
to first
polite.
say, what a treat this is to be in the space with Abiyat and Doug, because I followed the show, but then also with my dear sister, Susan. So I've just gotten so much closer to her. We've known each other for years, but she's just absolutely fantastic in terms of just uplifting Arab writers, particularly women Arab writers. So my migration story, I was born in Chicago. My father is from a town called Albira, which is, it is connected to Ramallah, and the municipalities, I think, are separate. But when people think of Ramallah, Albira also comes up. And my mom is actually from Hebron. And so she is kind of like a city gal who married a peasant, but her family actually lived in Albira too, which I think is really interesting, because if you know anything about El Khalil, Hebron, it has just become so terribly encroached by Israeli settlers there,
right.
the Jewish settlers, and so my mom didn't have that experience. And so I've mostly lived in Illinois, but I lived in Palestine in the West Bank for 5 years and went to school, and Abiyat and I had that connection.
You're both through that.
So it was, I don't know about you, Abiyat, it was like the best time of my life. I
agree.
I say that, and I say that to my daughters, So that is the gist of my migration story.
Yeah, thank you. I want to echo what Sahar said. Thank you both, Doug and Abir, for having us. And it is a joy to be with my sister, Sahar. My migration story is, one that probably a lot of people can connect with and identify with. My parents are both immigrants, and they came to the States in 1967 and met and got married and had me. And I spent summers going back home. That's what we called it. And summer vacation was not 2 weeks, it was like the whole summer, so because if you're paying for airline flight, tickets, you might as well stay all summer. And so I spent a time living there on my own. And in college, I spent a semester in college attending Birzeit University in near Albira. My parents are from a town called Taibe, which is actually outside of Ramallah. It's a small village. And it was a wonderful place to spend summers, and I really got connected to our culture. And growing up, I grew up as a two-culture kid. I spoke Arabic at home and English at school, and I think a lot of people have that experience.
Right. Yes, I agree. So I just want to make one quick point, because I get tired of this trope. what I love about our guest today is also Susan, you also represent a minority among minorities sometimes. As a Christian Arab, you guys are like sideswiped all the time, not even recognized, right? Like you guys really exist, you know? So I love the fact that we have this, the multiplicity of our own culture that
Yeah.
people don't understand, that we love and understand and are proud of it. But I just wanted to make that known that there is multi layers to our people. We are not one dimensional and a monolith. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. Can I say that about 20% of Palestinians are actually Christians?
Yep.
And it's, you know, a colleague of mine, Dr. Ryan Nator, and I just wrote an article in December for the Middle East Eye, and it was titled, Dear Western Christians, You're Welcome for Christmas. Because,
Yes.
you know, it's there's like this bypassing of our existence. And also there's something that's really happening more and more lately as Western Christians get more radicalized, which is that they are using our community as a way to like justify their own a kind of Islamophobia, which is not, you know, not acceptable at all. And so, yeah, so thank you for pointing that out. Yeah,
You're
appreciate
very
that.
welcome. Yes, it's very frustrating because it has to be known, and you guys are what I call the OGs. You know? The OGs of the Christian.
I'm telling you, Susan, she's forever the teacher. So she, around Christmas time, she sent a bunch of us we were on a group thread, and she mentions like, check out the OGs.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
The Palestinians, the OGs of Christianity, and you know,
Well,
so she schooled us a little bit.
Well, I just have this running joke about like when people meet me and they find out I'm Middle Eastern or Arab or Palestinian, and they ask me, when did I convert?
Oh my
It's the
God!
funniest
Yes.
thing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
We have
Wow.
lots of answers, like in our community, 32 AD, you know, stuff like that.
That's a good one. My favorite one that I saw during Christmas is it's Jesus from, you know, Bethlehem and Nazareth, not Jesus from New Jersey.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
both of you are amazing authors. I've read both of your books. Actually, Sahar, of course, yours for my own personal use, but also Susan, you came up with an amazing book for young children, and my daughter is currently reading it. So how did you come up with the idea for Farah Rocks?
It was actually my daughter who gave me the idea. Yeah, she was she's 15 now, but when she was about 10, she was in the Anne of Green Gables phase, which I was like, yes, because I loved that book when I was her age. And she just made this random comment to me about how she loves reading, but she wishes that there were books that had Arab girls in them. And I always bought my kids books with you know, diverse characters in them. So my kids are very familiar with like, you know, diverse protagonists in books because of my careful selection of their books. But she made that comment. She wished that there were some Arab girls in the books. And I was like, you know, I asked that question when I was her age too. And how come in 30 years nothing has changed, right? So I said, you know, let me see if I can write a book. And I really love doing it. And I picked the name Farah, Farah in Arabic, which means joy, because I wanted her to be like this joyful character. Like, you know, her identity is not this, you know, tragedy or burden. Like she moves seamlessly between home and school and friends and family. And I think that's possible for kids from, you know, kids who are from, you know, communities of color, that is possible in an ideal world, that your identity is not a reason why you're stopped on the street or why you suffer microaggressions at school. It's something that can be a positive in your life.
Absolutely.
And we loved reading Farah Rocks because when my daughter saw it, you know, it's that identity piece, like, you know, the girl calls her dad Baba, which is what my daughter says. And then you got this perfect, and my husband kind of got like whatever, but in Arabic, there's no P, right? So any word that starts with a P ends up being with a B in Arabic. So there's an episode when Baba's making pancake. My daughter loved it. She could connect to every little piece. And, you know, I got to personally thank you because, again, like you said, my children didn't have those. So and growing up as we all did in a society that doesn't appreciate or value it. So, you know, I love it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
So the same question to you, though, Sahar, but your book is very different. What was inspiration for your book, Beauty of Your Face?
Can I just say first how much I appreciate Susan's that point about joy, because just as a high school teacher, I'm always grappling with that balance of the reality. And then for me, it would be Black joy, because it is a predominantly Black population that I teach. And I'm afraid to fall into that trap of just putting in front of them. So this is something I'm really sensitive to. And that's why I love Susan's series. It's just gorgeous. So I'm in the opposite direction, because it is grappling with identity in the beauty of your face. But it was actually inspired by the real life murders of 3 Muslim Americans in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And I just sort of, sat with those lives. Yusor Abu Salha, her husband, Dia Shadi Barakat, and her sister Rezan. I'd written about gun violence in school, and I'm sure all of us have that fear as parents and then as educators, but this was a different kind of violence. And so I was just sort of wondering about, the stories behind the victims, first of all, and then also the story behind the shooter. And that's what I'm always interested in anyways, when it comes to fiction writing. So it wasn't in any way, trying to answer these big questions, about gun control and even Islamophobia. I was just really interested in, just all those choices, all the forces that carry people to critical moments, like what we just witnessed, last week. But that is the germ of the story.
But you have almost 2 stories going on at the same time. Like, you're following the story of your main, character. And I have to say, reading your story, growing up on the south side of Chicago, you make references to places. I'm like, I know where that is. I've been there, and the story is something that a lot of us have experienced, right? Whether it's violence towards our communities, whether it's that interconflict within families. Like, your story really hit that piece where it's like, I get it, and I felt so connected to it. So again, thank you for writing.
Thank you.
Such an amazing piece. Doug, do you want to go to the comments? Because those are my husband. He's responding to them.
I knew that was him.
Yes.
Right on time. Mahmoud always shows up on time. Right.
There you go.
So the PB, I get it. we figured you would.
Yes.
And then we got his endorsement as well. So thank you.
Thank you,
great show, guys. And yes.
Love it.
Great guest equals great show. So we appreciate that.
Yes.
So both of you all, each of you all touched on this a little bit really in your previous responses, but talk to us about how your identity plays a role in your work. So I don't know, we can go back to Susan or Sahar, whoever wants to jump in first.
So writing fiction is, it's funny when people know that you're a writer and they think they have this image that you just like sit under a tree by a river and, just write this stuff that comes into your head. And, but the fact is that, I almost wish it was like that. But the fact of the matter is that when you are a person of color or a person from a marginalized community, first of all, you're writing with the understanding that you don't have as many publishing opportunities as other people do, right? So there aren't that many spaces for you in the publishing industry. So, that's really hard. It's really hard knowing that, like, no matter what I write, I'm going to have a harder time. My agent's going to have a harder time selling this than somebody else. In fact, if you want to write about the Arab American community or about the Middle East and you're a white writer, you'll have an easier time getting published.
Yes. You said that on Twitter and I fell out of my seat.
Yeah.
Say it.
Yeah, you'll have an easier time, because white writers are seen somehow as like these objective observers, but like if you're from that community, somehow you're like unable to be objective or unable to be professional or, it's really, really difficult. And I mean, I know that other communities, other writers of color go through this. It's obviously not just us. But then the other part of it is that, you are writing and you still that you're writing for a larger reading audience that already has certain stereotypes about your community. So you're trying to write your truth but you know that people have these ideas. So like if I write about a woman and a family, and my other books that are not for children, if I write about a woman in a family who's being, abused by her husband, I honestly think in my head, am I like confirming some stereotype? It's a very, it's like a very fraught thing. Like I always go back to the example of Alice Walker and The Color Purple, and how, that book was so controversial. It's a gorgeous book, but it was so controversial, and she was accused of, airing dirty laundry, but other people were recognizing the brilliance of it. And, I just kind of think I have to write my truth. I just have to write what I know and what I believe to be true, while also trying to write as authentically as I can. Like I have to write, like I have to write about the beauty in our community, but also about the sharper things, the more difficult things to write about. So that's hard. Like even in my kids' book, in Farah Rocks, I mean, Farah and her family are immigrants who are like on the edge of financial failure. They're not the immigrants who came here with medical degrees and slid into jobs in hospitals or whatever. They are, they work, they are lower working class people. They are working very hard. They're living paycheck to paycheck. And that comes through in the book, because kids who are from working class families, they are very aware of money problems in the family. Very aware. So I try to be truthful about that, in the book.
Sahar?
Yeah, no, I appreciate everything that Susan said, and seconded. I think, and Susan and I have had this conversation in other spaces, that fear of inflating the stereotypes, right? And I think what I feel really firm about telling reading audiences, you can't be the only books that you're reading. So you need to actually go and pick up somebody else's. And let me give you an example. And Susan was actually in this conversation when there was a question to me, and it's still sitting with me, Susan, as you're going to hear, about somebody wanted me to comment on a book that they thought just had horrible stereotypes about Palestinians and Arabs. And, my feeling was this answer, that, well, first of all, I'm not going to critique, another writer, because as Susan is saying, you've got your truth. And so, I'm not going to speak to another Arab writer's experiences and to censor them. And so my feeling is that, please, audience, continue to support, our efforts and read widely. The other thing I'll say about identity is also interestingly similar to Susan's, that I think, I portrayed things that were also tough, a father who was an addict, who drank, and then a mother who had mental health issues. And I received so many positive messages about that from my immediate community, and those always mean the most. In fact, those are the people sitting on my shoulders. I do feel this burden of getting it right, and then to have to depict a woman who wears hijab, right? And so I'm always, I think, just highly sensitive, but and I'm sure Susan will speak to this, but I'm going to stick with my vision, and I'm going to not alter it, because I'm worried that someone's going to complain and someone's going to criticize. And so, speaking of another amazing writer, Chimamanda Adichie talks about the dangers, right? And I play that for my students especially, but as a writer, wow, that blew me away. This idea, she talked about how stereotypes are true. They're true, but they can't be the only story. Right. So I think if you look at my book, you're going to be like, oh, I recognize that. Yes. I recognize that person. Yes. And those can also be joyous, experiences. But I feel like in Susan's work and in mine, and what I'm reading in other terrific books, especially that came out in 2020, it was such an amazing year for Palestinian-American writers, is that we are very nuanced. We are very complex and layered, and I'm really enjoying doing this work.
Yeah. can I just say, and Sahar's work is gorgeous and layered and complex, and it's so good. And I think that, again, I'm so proud of her and the achievements of that novel, because it's so good to look at the New York Times, top, notable books of 2020 and see, my sister's book up there. It's a good feeling. It's a wonderful feeling. It's like a victory for all of us, And I just want to point out, like, to the audience that, as Arab women writing about the Arab community, we could become millionaires overnight if we wanted to. And let me tell you how. Because the second easiest thing to publish is to be a white writer writing about the Arab people. The other thing that you can do is be an Arab woman and write a book about how oppressed you are as a member of the Arab community. That will get you, you will sell 1 million copies in 2 weeks. Every reviewer will review the book and talk about how brave you are. It is completely, an expectation. It's like a desire. Like, acquisitions editors are like salivating, for these books. Like, they want these books because they know that these books will sell. As an Arab American Christian, it would be very easy for me. We have lots of examples of people who have kind of used that to demonize our community as like inside people, kind of spilling the truth. And it's it's ridiculous, and it's the single story. The single story sells. It sells like hotcakes. So we are trying to write authentic representations that are true to us and true to our communities, and that's not easy to do. It's not easy at all. Yeah.
Going on all those lines, and I'm loving the honesty, because people need to hear this and people need to understand it, right? And not just coming from the typical, like, oh, I'm a hijabi. That's something that people expect her to say. Now, I'm going to make a comment that Sahar said to me when we had our book club about her book, and one of the questions was, did you write your book out of personal experience? And Sahar, correct me if I'm wrong, you specifically said that's a question that you get a lot, where people act like, writers of color can't have their own imagination. Everything has to be a personal experience, right? So that resonated with me when you said that, because I'm like, yeah, that's right. Even with amongst ourselves, where she read that because she had a friend or she had a cousin or whatever. It could just be your own, talent that you're using to write your stories.
Well, Abir, what's coming up for me, and it goes back to Susan's comment about, white authors being viewed as more objective. And I really appreciate that insight, because, like, for years, think about, white folks telling black folks story.
Right?
Yes.
And I think that ties exactly what you were saying, right? So Sahara can write something objectively, right? Because if you're not intermingled, like, intimately with the experience, like, you just can't see anything other than that,
right?
And then coupling that with, like you said, more objective. So that's, like we said, the first segment always is, this is heavy, because I love reading and to hear from authors about really digging to, and my book list is growing. So apparently I got to pick up some more books too from these wonderful authors, but I really appreciate the insight. But yeah, this is a follow-up from Susan, your first comment on this question from a good friend of ours and colleague, Vernon. So Susan, he's saying, would you say personal truth is not always, nor should always, be objective?
No, it's not objective at all. And as Sahar said, like, it shouldn't be like, you shouldn't be reading just, one story. I appreciate the question. And I think sometimes, it's not that it's, you're not trying to be objective, like, I'm not a journalist, I'm a fiction writer. That's my job. And so I am trying to delve into the heart and the mind of my character, and I'm trying to show you the world. And Sahar did it with 2 characters. You know what I mean? I'm trying to show you the perspective of this character, and I'm trying to show it to you, from this kind of authentic, background. From this, it's maybe informed by my lived experience but it's not like, I'm not trying to be objective. And back to that previous point, I remember when the movie 12 Years a Slave came out, a lot of my students saw it, and I told them to read the book. And so we had like this little kind of book club on campus, and I pointed something out to them, which is that Solomon Northup did not write that book. That book, the book itself, was written by a white abolitionist who they, at the time, somebody, I'm sure it was the white abolitionist ghostwriter, decided that he could tell the story better. And so the story was dictated to him. And so I pointed out to my students, there are sections in the book where he is allegedly describing how the slaves would get together like on Sunday evening and have a big joyous celebration, and then the mistress would give the female slaves little bits of ribbon to decorate their hair. All of it's like right out of Gone with the Wind, and you're like,
the benevolent
wow,
master.
The benevolent master.
Right.
So
That
I'm
narrative.
like, even a well-intentioned abolitionist from the North still was falling prey to this BS, right? So you just have to be, people. Everyone is nice, right? Like everyone has good intentions. Editors who want stories about Arab women, they have good intentions. They probably voted for Biden. Okay, that's fine. But it's like, but they still have, these stereotypes in the back of their mind.
Right.
They're still surprised when they see a person of color who is, well-spoken or whatever, so we have to be aware of that. That's all.
Right. And what's the saying? The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Oh, Doug, I just used that expression today.
See, Sahar and
I love it. Yeah,
I know, right?
I used it. Yep, with a group of teachers. Yep, talking about administration. No shame.
I hear that.
A really good example of what you are talking about is just see the reviews to the book Hillbilly Elegy.
Oh, right? Yeah.
Written by a white man coming from, the parts of Kentucky and Ohio. And just and I'm thinking, this is a book written by person who lived it and breathed it. And now they're upset because the image is not correct. I'm thinking, how do you think people of color feel now that it's a book about them written by somebody else? Right. But yet we have to accept and be okay with it, right? Yep. So I just wanted to make that comparison because, I read the book and I watched the movie and it was interesting. To me, it was nothing new. I kind of like, okay. But it was that fascinating to see the reviews by people who grew up in that area, who are from that community, upset about the fact that a book was written by them.
Didn't like the way they were represented, huh?
No. So.
Oh, well.
Yes. All right. Next question.
All right. So how about, and I know there was some talk about like being published as women of color, as Palestinian authors, but talk to us, what's the most difficult challenge that each of you has faced as a writer or author?
I'll speak to the novel experience just really quickly, but this is just like an add-on to what we've been talking about, is worrying that white publisher is going to want to change, my vision. And when I say vision, I mean, I had imagined Afaf and the shooter, right? And them wanting to drop the shooter. So they want, the rejections that I received were, they loved Afaf's story, which is very heartening. It was a wonderful validation, but wanting to package it as this immigrant story when she's actually second gen. So, so you know what I mean? And it's like, and that's my experience. And them not believing that, like Susan was telling, that is going to sell. And so I'm constantly worried about, even now, like following up, and I want to make sure that I don't allow the industry to mess with my creativity and my art, and that has been an interesting experience. So I'll be completely honest. I worry. I'm like, am I pandering? And is that now going to start seeping in? And who am I writing for? And then I always have to check that and step back and say, I am going to produce this book next. I don't give bleep about, and then I hope that people who love my previous work are going to hop back on. So I think it's balancing what I know is economical, because obviously I want to get paid, right? But also sticking to my gut and not compromising that artistic vision. And some of my best teachers of writing have said, you don't want to put a book out in the world that you don't recognize anymore. So
wow, yeah.
Powerful. Love that.
How about you, Susan?
I would echo what Sahar said. Like, I just want to stay true to my vision. I don't want anyone to mess with my story. I don't want anyone to change anything that I've written. You can fix my commas, but other than that, leave my characters alone.
Right.
But one of the other difficulties, I think, is just we just don't have enough people of color in the publishing industry. Like, I feel that my work. I mean, and it's funny, like with the Farah Rocks books. My editor was Eliza Leahy at Capstone, who acquired the books, but she was very familiar with the Arab American community in Detroit and Dearborn. So I feel like she is a white woman, but she totally knows the community, and that's why she was interested in acquiring the book, which was really great. But in general, I find that editors who are people of color are much more, they ask better questions about the book, or I don't know. I feel like they're more willing to look at the books, to consider them for publication. So we just need more people in the industry. The industry is predominantly, it's something like 89%, white women. Wow. It's a very homogenous industry. Yeah.
Just like education.
Right.
Yes.
People of color to go in administration and other aspects. And it reminds me of, I'm listening and I'm reading Once I Was You by Maria Hinojosa, who's famous, NPR journalist. And she talks about the same thing of finding the person who's higher up, who's a minority, because they will understand, you gravitate towards them, right? As opposed to having all of these other people who enjoy what you're doing, but don't have an idea. And just for our audience sake, Dearborn, Detroit in Michigan has one of the largest and oldest Arab populations. So that's why she would make that connection and she would know. So yeah, so thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess Keith's in agreement on those percentages, right?
Sounds
very
like
familiar to us as educators.
So I'm loving everything. I'm like McDonald's. I'm loving it, right? I love the energy.
I think it's sponsored. I think you said that.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying I don't want to be, it's a copyright. I know, whatever. So we can talk forever. I mean, having you two and ladies, I'll definitely be in touch because there are some other ideas. My brain never stops working.
Love that brain.
Yeah, I know, right? I think I told this today. I have inner monologues and it just doesn't shut up. So we have our famous 2 questions that we would like to ask you. So I'll ask you my baby for both of you. Which artist would you have perform an album about your life and why? And what would the album title be? Let's see what you ladies pick up.
Do you have something, Susan?
So it's funny, if you look at my playlist, you'll see like everything from like Sabah Fakhri, who's like a classical Arab taught up singer, to like the Wu-Tang Clan. So like, I don't know.
Wow, I love it.
I mean, it's like everything. Yeah, exactly. It's like everything, So
nice.
So I would say so I think one of the albums that affected me the most when I was in my 20s was Lauryn Hill's The Miseducation of
I knew you were going to say that.
Did you really?
Yeah, right now when you said it affected you in your 20s, I'm like, I think we're about the same age.
Yes.
And knowing you're like only the second person who mentioned Lauryn Hill. I'm disappointed in other people. Good for you.
Okay, because the thing is, like, so we were using CDs back then.
Right.
I had to buy it 3 times because I kept wearing it out. I just went over and over and over. And I think because it's like that coming of age, that awareness, the lyrics, the music, it's just everything, together. Yes. I think I would like have Lauryn Hill do it with like, like a modern Arabic singer, like dropping some guest, tracks or something like that. Yeah, I don't know what it would be called. Lauren will come up with something.
We can always do self-titled too, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Yeah.
Sahar?
Okay, so you know what I did? I actually prepared for the hip hop question, and I polled my students because I thought Doug would be so proud. So can I share just like a few of their like from those?
When we get to his question, answer my question first.
You know what? Okay.
What is Doug's question?
I did think about this, and so mine is not as deep as Susan, but here's someone who. Only because I loved her so much when I was a younger teen in the 80s. Cyndi Lauper, who to me
yeah.
is
Oh,
really
yeah, great
cool.
songwriter. Yes.
And so I just love that she could be high, but then she can also
Mhm.
be serious and deep. And like in terms of, I did think of a title, and I was thinking Inside Out, because I think there's one persona that people see that dominates, and I would just love to have a space where I could just, you know, unleash, I suppose. And maybe Susan has got a little bit of that, like in our times together when we write together. So that I hope answers that question. But I was I polled my wonderful high school students, and some of them are doing their contemporary research on the impact of certain individuals in our society, and some of them are looking to hip hop artists and so on. So can I just give a DJ and then
hold on, just so this is what we get. We used to start every show with Sahar in the chat, and and it was so happy. I'm so happy that we have you here as our guest. But we try to surprise people, but it's finally catching up to us, right, Abir? I know. So
first before mine. I'm like in some sort of way right now. I'm in my feelings, right?
Oh my God, that's so funny. I just thought, I'm going to
out of
impress
business.
them. And so one DJ I thought would be really cool to share.
We're just going to go into the
all right. So hold on. So Sahar, let me set it up. I should have turned over to you.
Sure.
Okay. So as Sahar is foreshadowing, right, for our author friend, we like to we honor hip hop here, and Susan has foreshadowed this as well. So for those that do follow the show, and Sahar has been with us for a while, and Susan says she's also been a part of our viewership. So we honor hip hop, and there are 4 pillars. Those pillars being graffiti art, DJing, breaking, and MCing. So we asked our guests if they can name one person from each of the pillars. So Sahar has done some homework. Susan already kind of got started on about nine MCs she actually came up with in the woo, but I'm not gonna give it away. I'm gonna be quiet, and I'm gonna turn it over to our guests. So if you all want to team up on it, or however you want to tackle it,
I'll team up. I'll team up with Sahar students.
And you know, these were actually pretty cool. So I'm just going to give one from each. And so DJ Khaled, I keep calling him.
Got a rapper people,
let me tell you like something really cool. So for DJ, and I keep wanting to call him Khaled. He's actually the nephew of my husband's aunt. So my husband's not directly, isn't that? And I tell my students that I try to get, the cool, you know. And so that's one. And then let me see, for rapper, Kanye came up twice in the ones who I polled.
Chicago.
Chicago love. And B-boy, are we familiar with William Wildebeest Adams?
I'm not sure I am, but okay. But we'll get familiar.
Okay.
All right.
And let's see, graffiti artists, Keith Harrington, Brandon Odoms, and of course Basquiat too. So those were my top contributions from my students. So shout out to them.
From your research. All right, shout out to Sahar.
Researched them.
Nicely done.
Shout out to her students and her.
How about you, Susan? What do
you want to add any?
I'll go with those answers. I feel so old. Like I don't know a lot of the.
That's how I feel.
I know.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
Nicely done. And then we always get the Keith is kind of he's our judge of all things 4x4. So there you go. So Keith has.
I love it.
Sahar might be into the. We had the somewhere out there. We had the 4x4 All Stars. So Sahar might.
Awesome. I'll let my students know.
So before we let everybody go, if you want to follow Suzanne, this is her website, SuzanneMuaddi.com, and then also Sahar. You have a workshop coming up.
I do, yes.
So I thought we would advertise for that. Of course, you're welcome. So if you're interested in talking about stories and fiction, you can sign up for that workshop as well. And so that would work for Sahar. And then you have Suzanne. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This was great.
This is such a fun evening.
Good.
Yeah,
glad to hear.
I agree.
Glad to hear. And you all look so comfortable. It's you all had to, the vibe set right. And I just love the insight from, because like I said, I love to read. So thank you all for sharing your insight on the fine work that you do.
Yes. We'll be in
Thank
touch.
you.
All right. Good night.
both.
Bye-bye.
Stay
Bye.
Take care.
Bye. Thanks, Keith.
All right, thank you, Keith.
We
Good.
love the segment.
We do it for the people, right?
Yes, we do what we can.
Keith's our guy, you know that.
Yes.
So, Abir, this is great.
I loved it.
Great. This is the way to start the year. I loved it. Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
The love keeps coming up, but that's what it's about. So, wonderful, folks. So we do have Vernon asking about we need to make sure folks can get to that. Yes. Sorry about that.
Yes. On the website, we can share
We
the
probably
information.
can. Yeah, we probably can tweet it out too. We
can
can
tweet it out,
through our
yes.
social media. We'll
Yep.
we'll share it through our social media too. Yep.
Karen, just let everybody know, was one of the first students I ever taught.
Wow.
And we are connecting. Mwah, Karen, how are you? Thank you for joining in.
Excellent.
And Amber is also distant cousin, but also friend for years. So thank you for
I love
tuning
the
in.
support. Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent.
So what's our next show?
All right. So next show, very exciting. So next show, we're going to stay with our theme, the right stuff. So we'll be on in 2 weeks, right? So on the 27th, we've got the same theme, but it's also the last episode of the month. So that means we have a hip hop focus, and we will have a guest who I've known since high school. His name is Roland Taylor. He is the author of 2 children's books. One is called The Hip Hop Chess Master, and the other is called I Know I Can. And I would be remiss to not, if I didn't mention, he's also an MC. So we got the super mashup between our right stuff and our hip hop, at least on the MCing pillar. So very excited about our next episode as well. We're going to keep the excitement going. And also, we want to say hello and thank you to Mr. Carter Teach. Remember, he took a break from Twitter.
He came back at the right time, didn't he?
Great timing, Corey. So thank you for providing
Yes.
our music for intro and outro, and can't wait till we get together again. A lot of fun, Abir. Thank you.
You're welcome. So we'll be in touch, and tune in for our next show for our hip hop episode. And thank you for tuning in, and everybody have a good night.
Yep. Good night, everyone.
Bye.